USAE, FFA, and Agriculture Ventures. I'm Lyla.
And I'm Natalie, and we're your hosts for this podcast.
We currently serve as your 2023 to 2024 Florida FFA District 9 President and Secretary, and we could not be more excited for our year of service with some of the brightest FFA members from across District 9.
Today we have a very special guest with us, the 2020-2021 Florida FFA State Secretary, Emma Poole. We are so thankful that you're here with us, and we just want to let you do a little introduction.
Well, thank you, Lyla and Natalie, for having me. Like Natalie said, my name is Emma. I served as the 2020-2021 Florida FFA State Secretary. Doesn't feel like it's been that long ago. But after that, I also served as Florida's National FFA Officer candidate last year, which was a whole adventure. And it's crazy to think that this week it has been a year since that. Mm-hmm. Time flies. But sure. I am now a college student, so that's also fun. But thank you guys so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I've been doing nothing during fall break, so I've had the whole week to just be like, oh, I'm so excited for this.
Just relax and take care.
Yes.
Okay, so today we're just going to have a few questions for you just to really get to know you and kind of like the whole state officer, FFA, agriculture process. So the first question, you talked about being in college. Where do you currently go to college and what are you pursuing for your future career?
I currently go to Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida. My major is communications, and I have a double concentration, which it's a small school, so instead of specific majors, we have major concentrations. Mine are multimedia journalism and media production strategies. I'm the editor-in-chief for our school's newspaper, as well as the sports editor and the center spread and graphic designer. I also manage media for our TV network, and I am a photographer, videographer, sideline interview reporter, and last but definitely not least, game recap article writer for our baseball team with the athletic communications department at Florida Southern. So I do a little bit of a lot of things. Tongue twister.
So you really do it all.
Yes.
Just having fun
I have
and
no clue what I want to do.
Yes, man. Just living your college life, doing everything you can while you can. So I think that's really good. So while you do go to college now, you were in FFA and pretty big in FFA. So my question for you is, why did you run for state office?
Well, I loved telling this story, and the question, why did you run for state office, is something that I don't want to say that they ask during screening every year, but just about every year they ask it. So anybody who wants to run for state office out there, be prepared to answer this question, and be so real with this answer. If you want to run for state office because you're not confident in your public speaking, say that. Don't feel like you have to make up some incredibly cool story. I happen to have an incredibly cool story. My great uncle, his name was Gray Miley. He was a member of the Plant City FFA chapter.
I love Plant City FFA.
Yes. And in 1929, he was, I guess, a president or something at Plant City, and he wanted to run for state FFA office because Florida had just had an FFA chapter chartered. He was the first Florida FFA state president, and in the same year he became the first national officer from the state of Florida. He was the 1929-1930 Southern Region Vice President, and then that's generation one. Okay, generation two was my papa, Paul Miley, who was a member of the Turkey Creek FFA chapter when it was a high school. And he did livestock judging back when National Convention was in Kansas City. They went out there and it was a dynasty and it was great. And he just fondly recalls that, even though it was 1952. Ready for the third generation? My dad was an FFA. He did livestock judging and land judging, and he didn't have a lot of confidence growing up. He didn't have a lot of public speaking experience, but he had skill. He was great at livestock judging, land judging. When middle schools and high schools competed against each other, he had a pretty young mom, and so her younger brothers competed against him. He competed against his uncles when he was in middle school and beat them sometimes, which he always talks about. But as soon as he got to high school and realized he would have to do oral reasons with livestock and land judging, back when you had to do an oral defense with land judging, he dropped out. He quit everything. And somehow, fourth generation, here it is, his daughter found out about FFA without him even telling her. And I was like, Dad, why'd you quit? Well, because I didn't think I could. And that's why I ran for state office. Because it was so ingrained in me to be an FFA. I wanted to follow in Uncle Gray's footsteps, and my cousin Barrett Keene, who was a national officer, like I wanted to follow in their footsteps, do something big. But mostly I wanted somebody that my dad could live vicariously through. You know, he always jokes that the public speaking gene just skipped his generation. But I hope that through everything I did, he was able to see what he could have done and maybe live a little bit of that experience that he never got to have. So I ran for my dad. I ran for my advisor, Mr. Tim Cribbs. He has meant the world to me and always will. And I also ran for all of the kids like my dad who needed someone who could tell them that, you know, they didn't have to be the best at everything. So that's the whole lore, I guess, the backstory.
I mean, like, I guess it's kind of like the underdog almost. Like, you kind of understand, like, where people are coming from. And we were talking before this, but, like, the minority of the majority. And it's kind of just getting the understanding of the kids that may not actually understand the foundation of FFA. I know whenever I joined, I knew nothing. I was like, this is a cool thing, I guess. But then once I learned about it, it's kind of understanding that, oh, like, I guess my parents didn't do it or they didn't know how to do it, but maybe I can show them like what they could have done or what my siblings can do. Even like my siblings saw what I could do. They're just like, oh, like maybe I can do that too. And I was like, yeah, you can do it.
My cousin joined FFA
Yeah.
and she's at Tomlin now
Yeah.
and invites me to her banquets and things. And I just love going because
Yeah.
I love seeing her do that. And you're right. The gravity of representing everyone, so important because, you know, think about the leaders in the United States who were in 4-H and FFA.
Yeah.
We're talking Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton were in 4-H. Even like Jimmy Carter, presidents were in FFA, and he was from Plains, Georgia. Y'all ever been to that
No.
area? Let me tell you that it is not the most affluent place on earth. And think what we would have missed out on if we did not cater to the people who don't have everything. It is so important to represent that, to have somebody that can stand for that and just stand in the gap for those students.
Speak for them in a way. Okay, so the next question is one thing that you didn't what is just like over like the broad state office thing, what is one thing that you didn't expect about state office, like kind of just hit you out of nowhere?
Well, COVID, I feel like it's the obvious answer. I was a COVID baby and I didn't expect to not be able to do any chapter programs for the first semester or to have to record a virtual conference. It was fun, but it was honestly not one of my favorite experiences from state office. So I'm glad that, you know, we don't have to do that anymore. But because of my year, I thought I was going to do a lot more that I didn't get to. So that surprised me. Not being able to campaign surprised me. But that was totally out of everyone's control. But one thing that did surprise me that is normal and not dependent on COVID, as all the other things I've listed were, just was how different it is from place to place. I know that you and I were talking about this beforehand, but going through the programs at Tomlin and at Durant, and very, very wonderful programs, but very, very intense programs. And you get so used to being on all the time and being serious all the time and just game face, lipstick on, hair done all the time. You see that did not change when I got out of FFA, but just, you know, I think that one of my defining state office moments was at Bartow High School, the last day of National FFA Week, my year as a state officer, and they had this meeting. And when we have chapter meetings in the programs that I've been in, it was real business like, you know, you're doing the opening and closing ceremonies. You've got the announcements to make. You're out there in official dress on a microphone and you're making all the important announcements. They were out there in flannels and we all made s'mores. And me and Cassie Jo Waters, the president, I love her. I still talk to her. She's a day back now. We're still friends. We sang Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man karaoke, you know, Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn, that song. We sang that karaoke out there in the back of the land lab at the chapter meeting. And they were all wearing their flannels, and it was this cozy little campfire themed meeting, and we were singing the campfire song from SpongeBob. And that was so surprising, just getting to see people's homes. No 2 days were the same in state office. And while there were things that I would do differently now, and while there were things about that year that I wish were different, I cherish that because I got to see a side of so many special places in Florida whose stories don't get told, and that I wouldn't have known aside from being a state officer. So I cherish people taking me in and just learning the history of the programs, and Bartow specifically, that meeting when we sang karaoke and it was campfire themed, so fun. And they have just such a rich history in their program. You know, I went in their ag building, and they had this whole library of these books dating back to the 1920s and 30s. And when I retired from state office, they gave me one of the books. It was about annual flowers, different types of annual flowers, and it had these beautiful color illustrations, and it was from 1938. I still have it on my bookshelf to this day. But you never know about any of that until you get to experience it and immerse yourself in it. So I will always be grateful for state office for teaching me the little niches of Florida FFA, and for getting to go to those places. And I'm a very road trip person. I'm a very antique store person. So I loved getting to be a part of people's homes for a day and see what was different than what I'd seen before.
I think that's so important that you're able to see the real part of FFA, not just a part where we see people win blue ribbons, nor being able to show their cow or their pig at the county fair, but see the kids genuinely have fun, be able to make new friendships, and really grow as a family. And you may have never visited those chapters before, never met those kids before, but just the warm and welcoming that you feel, that's really what FFA is meant to be. Being able to help grow our future leaders of America, being able to help have those connections that really keep us strong and bonded together.
100%. And, going on chapter visits, things like members coming together to plant a new tree in front of their land lab as a commitment for growth in the chapter, and getting to be there for that and help them with that one day during state office, that means more than, what people see on the outside. That commitment to growth and that symbolism that is going to last for so many years. Getting to see so many special little things like that, it was a true blessing.
It's the little things that really mean the most.
Yes.
Some people might think it's standing on top of the stage at your state convention, but truly to you, it's those little moments that you're able to make with those connections with different FFA members, and that's really important for us. So my next question for you is, how did you deal with the pressure of state office that comes with the seriousness with the stress?
I have always kind of prided myself on doing well under pressure. But I think that it took high school, my junior and senior year, for me to realize that I didn't do well under pressure, because caving and just going along with it is not dealing well. I started taking care of myself during state office. I started figuring out who I was. I had the goal of running for state office for such a long time, and just the desire to be an overachiever and be successful. And also in that, I became a people pleaser. Whatever people told me I needed to do. And some of them I trusted their expertise, and it was a good thing. Like my mama and Mr. Cribbs and Mrs. Cribbs and Mr. Sturgis and Miss Coleman, all of my advisors, Mr. Stewart, they all had a lot to speak into my life and a lot to say to help me grow and become a better version of myself. But there were people who spoke into my life that didn't want to help me become a better version of myself. And because I'd become so used to other people telling me what I needed to do, I listened to them too. And it was a mistake that led me down a very, very dark path during the latter part of my high school. But state office gave me the opportunity to be under pressure and deal with it in a different way. You know, instead of just listening to people tell me what to do and say, okay, I finally, through that, gained courage to say, you know, this might be what's best for you, but it's not what's best for me because I know myself now. Anybody who wants to run for state office or do anything in any organization, not just FFA, anybody who's on any kind of team or who's, you know, in any kind of leadership position, heck, even anybody who does a group project in a class needs to know that first and foremost, to take care of yourself, you have to know yourself. And having everyone in my life telling me exactly what I needed to do to go the places that I wanted to go really created my image and created my persona for me. And I didn't actually realize that I did not know who I was until I was almost 20 years old. When I finally had free reign and retired from state office, I had absolutely no idea what to do with myself. I was like, oh my gosh, free will.
It's like a deer in headlights.
Like a deer in the headlights. I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, what am I supposed to wear? What am I supposed to say? What type of occasion is this? So dealing with pressure was definitely a big thing. But the biggest wake-up call was that I needed to start knowing myself so that I could do what was best for her. And when I figured out, you know, when the curtain inevitably fell and I figured out that Emma Poole, full government legal name, was an image and she was an ideal and she was just being held together by fake tan and hairspray and lipstick, that really helped me. And telling myself that I wasn't perfect, but that was okay, ushered in, you know, just such a better era of my life than what I'd had before. You got to know yourself before you can go anywhere, and you got to know yourself before you can represent yourself in any way. So, you know, yeah, I'm running for state office. What do I stand for? No clue. I mean, I knew my beliefs, I knew all of that, but I didn't really grasp that it was okay to stand up for them. And I didn't really grasp that it was okay and good to not be perfect all of the time. So to handle the pressure during state office, I say all of that to say this, because I always take a long time to get to any point. Sorry, Cribs, if you're listening in heaven. I still take a long time to get to every point. You got to know yourself. And when you know yourself, you can handle any pressure because you can do what's best for you. But if you don't know what's best for you, you're going to fall under pressure. Mm-hmm. That is the biggest thing. I could sit here and list so many examples, but I'm not going to. It's just the biggest thing, to know yourself so you can make those choices that are going to be good for you.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of just like figuring out yourself. I know, like, at the beginning, whenever I first entered high school in the beginning, I was like the J.G. Smith president. So if you're listening, I was like basically the freshman president. And whenever you're going into that, it's a bunch of freshmen that, one, have no clue what they're doing, and two, they're getting into high school, so none of us know what we're doing, just in general, not just in FFA. And a lot of things was just like contest. They're just like, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And I ended up that banquet, I think I got like, I think I got 12 pins at the end of that banquet. And I was just like, oh gosh.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
And you make such a good point, Natalie. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Nobody.
State officers don't know what they're doing. National officers don't know what they're doing. State staff, national staff, they don't always know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Your advisors don't always know what they're doing. Your parents don't always know what you're doing. They're doing. Mm-hmm. They don't know what you're doing either, but I meant to say what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. Some of us have become a lot better at looking like we're knowing what we're doing.
Acting like you got it all together.
Yes. No one has it all together. So do not beat yourself up. Do not think that you're not capable of achieving whatever you want to achieve because you don't have it together. Because even the biggest role models who look perfect all the time and have it together all the time, no, they don't. That is a lie. It is just a very good cover up. So that is so important and so true.
I think like a quote that I heard like a while ago. It was like, it's your parents' first time doing what they're doing. Like, it's their first time being parents. They also don't know what they're doing. And that's the same thing for everything else. It's these state officers, their first time being state officers. It's these officers, it's their first time. It's FFA members, it's their first time being an FFA. So truly, like, nobody knows what they're doing. And that's like a common
give
thing.
yourself grace.
Yeah.
Give others grace too, because it's all of our first time going through each day. No 2 days are ever the same, and we're all on this wild ride of life, and we have no clue what it's about to throw at us. And we just, sometimes we swing for things that aren't in the strike zone.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't swing for things that are. And, that's all part of living and learning and showing each other grace, even when we don't know that others need grace, giving it to them anyway. So important.
Yeah, coming to that like common understanding that sometimes people need help even if they're not asking for it, stuff like that. So to kind of switch out of the state office realm, we're going to go into the SAE. So I obviously have a really cool SAE. So what was your SAE in school?
So we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but I did a little bit of everything. Lyla, you and I have discussed that you always thought you had to show a pig or a steer. I always thought I had to show a pig or a steer too. And, there were some hobby cows, some tax exemption cows across the street from my house growing up. And I fed them and played with them and grew up with the cows and loved growing up with the cows. But we could not afford a show steer. We could not afford a show pig. We could not afford anything. And I feel like we have done a lot of FFA members a serious disservice and not letting them know that they can still accomplish their goals, even if they are not affluent in a monetary way. I love that a national FFA has started to include community service hours as an option for qualifications for the state and American degree. I think that is such a huge step in the right direction. I hope they continue to do more with that. But I stand for the people who did not think they could have an SAE, did not think they could ever get their state or American degree because their parents could not buy them a show project. I put in several times into the pig drawing at the Florida Strawberry Festival, and I never got drawn, not once, ever. My friend Jessie Ray Varnum always jokes that she is the president of the Pig Haters Club because she never got drawn. I am the vice president because I also never got drawn. So Mr. Cribbs let me show a Federation pig, a chapter pig, several times. I got to show one of my own pigs once at the Hillsborough County Fair, which was super fun. But pigs, they are a trip. My goodness.
They're crazy.
I showed a heifer one time that belongs to my Uncle Richard Joyner, and her name was Lily Mae. It's a very, very flowery, nice, pretty name for an ornery calf. She was insane, and kind of still is. She's mellowed out a little bit now that she's had a few calves, but she was crazy. But what I really loved was one day I was sitting in my middle school science class, and my mother texted me. She goes, "Hey, my friend, Miss Colleen, she has this avocado tree and there's some seeds on the ground. I'm thinking if we pot them, you could sell them to make some money for your degrees in FFA." And I'm like, if it's free, it's for me. So we went to Miss Colleen's house and we dug out all those avocado seeds, and my dad found some nursery pots. I don't know where. Nowhere. Then I walked down the road to this nursery, and I was like, "Hey, can I have some pots?" And they're like, "Sure, take them." I'm like, "Hey, thanks." So I walked down there in official dress. I'm like, "Oh, I'm Emma. I'm in FFA at Tomlin Middle School." And I was like, "Can I have your nursery pots?" They're like, "Sure, take them." I'm like, "Yes." So I potted them all, and then every year Mr. Sturgis does his plant sale at Durant, and he let me bring my avocados out there and sell them. And my chemistry teacher bought some and planted them in the swampy area near his house, and they moved out of the house, but the avocado trees are still there. So I sold those, and then of course I had this big giant white rabbit with red eyes. My goodness, crazy. He was the Strawberry Festival Grand Champion, no clue how, and they gave me a premium check for $42. So that also helped. But, you know, I think it's so cool the people that can put in for proficiency awards because they have these huge projects. But I also think it's so cool the people who do little things like podcasts or take avocado seeds out of someone's yard and just take every opportunity that they have to do as much as they can to put themselves in a position where they can succeed. I am all for you do what you gotta do as long as it's legal. To make it happen. Do what you got to do. Don't break any laws. But hey, you don't have to have this big, amazing project. We are all just out here wilding, honestly, trying to make it work. And you do what you got to do. Like,
That's
really
so
do.
true.
So that's what I did. I showed anything that, you know, fair committees allowed me to get my hands on. I volunteered everywhere that I possibly could, and I planted a lot of avocado seeds.
So I think that's really cool because it is called a supervised agriculture experience. It's not just showing your cow, your pig at your local county fair, but it's also being able to really just advocate for agriculture, being able to be a representative and doing something that you're passionate about. FFA members who are just now getting into their SAE, either if they're in 6th grade in middle school or if they're in their 11th grade in high school, you can start anywhere truly. And things like this, our podcast, it's an ag communications SAE, and it's so important that FFA members are educated on these things, learning about what they can do, as simple as getting some avocado seeds and being able to sell those.
Can I tell you how upset I am that I didn't know that ag communications SAE projects even existed? Because I'm a communications major now, and I might want to work for the Farm Bureau or Florida Department of Agriculture someday doing social media. I have done photography projects with the citrus industry and cattle and everything. I would have loved to do that. Like, FFA members, anyone who's listening, please educate yourselves. You don't have to it doesn't have to be a money pit. You can find something you love. You can do anything you love. Because, you know, if you're in FFA, you love agriculture. So anything you do that you love is going to be agriculture related. I said that wrong. You have other hobbies too, obviously. But any agricultural project that you pick that you're passionate about, you're going to love. You're going to have a good time with that. You know, even if it's not the traditional, I'm going to show my cow. Do something that you love. There are so many opportunities. It's so awesome.
And
so awesome.
And being an FFA member from 6th grade all the way to 11th grade where I am now, it's really different from my perspective of what an SAE is. SAEs are the reason why I got an FFA from my older brother showing his pig at our county fair. And ever since then, that's what I thought I had to do. I almost thought that what's the point of being an FFA if you can't show an animal? And as I got older, my mindset started to change. Now, of course, I've shown like pigs, steers, I've done all that fun stuff, but it's more about what can you do to make a difference? What can you do to learn and especially apply that to your future career? Now, not everybody wants to be a cattle rancher, and that's great if you do because we need a lot of y'all to be able to keep this industry going.
We do.
But it's people who are like us, people who are like the FFA members who have a voice, but they don't know how can they spread their information. How can we educate others on the agriculture industry and our true passions? So I feel like it's really important that we're able to educate other FFA members and people part of different types of organizations where they can find their place and how they can truly advocate for agriculture. So with that being said, how much time and money did you spend with all of your different SAEs?
Oh my gosh, the pigs, I spent so much time with them. I bonded with them. I love animals. I love animals. I live on a lake at college and there's a bunch of swans and geese there. And I go out there and I feed them and pet them and talk to them. And I've given them all names. And the Parks and Recreation Department for the city let me hold two of them the other day when they were giving them their checkups. And my friends are like, oh, you're like Snow White. No, I just have spent a lot of time with animals. I'm not a princess. I just have spent a ton of time with animals. And I would go out there every day and walk my pigs in that Durant Land Lab. And I had this pig senior year, Muddy Buddy. He was my favorite. He's the one that I got Reserve Grand Champion Showman with at the county fair. I loved that pig. He was a Federation pig, I think. Yeah, he was. And he was just the best looking pig too. He was a little tank. I loved him. But he had good genetics, and he was a pretty agreeable pig. He liked to listen to George Strait. So every time I'd go out there and walk him, I'd have it going on my phone in my pocket, and he would just take off running. And he loved George Strait. But that pig was getting his exercise, so it was okay. I think that the more time you put into anything, the better it's going to be, the more you're going to know about it, and the more you're going to be equipped to speak on that and advocate for that to other people. You know, if I had gone out there and worked with Muddy Buddy twice a month, and then one of the animal rights advocates came up to my pen at the county fair and asked me how I could do such an evil thing, I might have sat there and been like, I don't know. But I worked with that pig every day, and I learned about that pig. I learned where it came from. I learned about the swine industry, the pork industry. And with the cows too, it's easy for me because I'm one of the people who gets distracted and will go into this deep dive about anything that I'm interested in. Yeah. I don't know if y'all do that, but if I see something that I find is cool, I'll Google it, and then I'll just sit on my phone and read about it for like hours, and then I will know everything there is to know about it. I know so many random facts, and it was the same way with the pigs and the cows. Like, I would just know all the random facts. And it's time that you put in spending with your animals, but also time that you put in learning about the industry, learning what you're actually taking part in, what you're advocating for, what you're supporting. With the avocado trees, thankfully, they kind of just were left to their own devices. I couldn't really put in much time with the rabbit because he would have scratched me to bits. I should have put in more time with the avocado trees because I didn't cover them one winter and the rest of them froze to death, so I couldn't sell anymore. But really, I mean, not even just projects, but with anything, the more time you put into something, the more you know about it, the more you care about it, the more it's going to pay off for you, whether that's monetary or not. As far as the money part of that question, I couldn't put much in monetarily, but my parents might not have been able to contribute to me in financial ways, but they contributed to me with heart, and with care and with attention and with support. And that is something money can't buy. So we couldn't put in a lot on that end, but putting in a lot on the other end got me exactly where I wanted to go.
Yeah, I think time just in general is something that we took a lot of even before doing the podcast or even our kickoff that we did a few weeks ago. We had like multiple meetings of just talking and making sure we had every single aspect of it figured out. And that also goes into the agricultural aspect. If you know nothing about the industry, how are you going to advocate for it? So that's why you have to do so much research just to understand just the basis of what you're advocating for and talking about and speaking about. Because if you're just reading facts off a screen and you're just like, oh yeah, like this is the truth, but you have to have like a need and a desire to speak for it.
People know when you mean it. People know when you love something, and love something money can't buy.
Yeah.
Like, they know if you have heart or if you just threw some bills at something. And really, I think that you don't really learn about something unless you're putting a lot into it.
Yeah. It's like pretty much the only reason that it'll work. If you're just throwing money at something, there's no way that it's going to advance as much as you would like it to if you're not actually putting heart into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So sort of more into the SAE, but so did you have like a CDE or LDE that like pushed you into more of your SAE?
This is going to be the disappointing answer. Not really. I did CDEs and LDEs because, as far as SAEs go, as I said, I just did anything I could. If I had the option to, I would have loved to do an SAE that related to forestry, which was one of my favorite CDEs. I went to forestry camp twice. It's so fun. I love this story. My sophomore year of high school, I was on the state forestry team with a bunch of seniors, and that was the year that another chapter forgot to submit their roster, and instead of disqualifying them, the state decided at a board meeting to make us co-champions. So when we all had to go on stage together at the end of the year, it was kind of awkward. But in exchange for us being co-champions, one team would get to go compete at nationals and one team would get their eligibility back for the next year. They flipped a coin to decide who got to go to nationals, and we didn't. And one or two of the people on that team graduated that year, but Cole Hansen, Dayton Chesser, and I got our eligibility back. So we are the only 3 people who can say that we won state forestry twice. And I would have loved to do something like that, but we didn't have the resources. I have an acre of land, and I have 4 pine trees planted on it, 2 slash pines, 2 longleaf pines. And I got them as seedlings from forestry camp my 7th grade year, and we planted them. Me and my dad planted them in the backyard, and I learned so much about the forestry CDE from taking care of those trees, those little seedlings. They're about 15 feet tall now. They have survived hurricanes, and they have had so many insects and diseases that were on the forestry contest. I used to take Mr. Cribbs samples of pine sawflies, pine webworms, brown spot needle blight that the longleaf pines got a lot when they were younger. But I knew all of that because of that CDE, and I took him samples for when he did the practices with the live samples. I would take him samples from my pine trees for that, and I learned a lot about that way. But a contest that I think really benefited my SAE project indirectly was extemporaneous public speaking. I loved XSTEM. That was my baby. I went to nationals for that one. By some miraculous move of God, I won nationals for that one my senior year of high school. And I will cherish that memory forever, because walking out from finals hall and seeing the RFD reporter covering that competition was something that really sent me into a communications career. The fact that people in the media got to interact with FFA was encouraging to me. I would love to work for RFD someday. If they're listening, do an internship or something with them at National Convention. I think that would be so fun, so awesome to do. And then I walked outside and saw snow for the only time in my life, so it was the perfect day. But I will never forget the same week that I went to the national competition for XSTEM was the week that all of the litigation between Monsanto and Bayer was going on. And I made the biggest blunder in my speech by referring to Monsanto as Monsanto when Bayer had bought the corporation. So if you haven't seen the National Extemporaneous Speaking Contest, when you give your speech, they give each of the judges computers. They fact check you during the competition, and somebody picked up on it. So I actually remembered as soon as I said it, oh, dang it, I messed up. So at the end, they came back and asked me about it. They're like, you referenced Monsanto. I'm like, actually, it's Bayer now. that was something that like taught me a lot about, just being honest, being like, yeah, I messed up there. This is what's actually on it. But to be educated about current issues and events. If you show any animal during showmanship, the judge, if they're the type of judge that I witnessed, will come over to you and start talking to you. What'd you feed this animal? What'd you learn about current events in the industry? It's the same thing, and you just got to go off the cuff. There's no way you can be prepared or know what that judge is about to ask you. So it wasn't the same thing, but it kind of was at the same time, because I sat there and was able to say, this type of Mormons, that was the feed that I always used. And oats, they always liked oats. I gave them a Nutter Butter every once in a while. You get it. But, and then talking to the animal rights people, you need to know the current events. And they pop up at those shows. They come in there, they're like, hey, you're evil. And then you're like, okay, so this is actually what's going on here. And these byproducts come from this. But you have to be prepared for anything. Like, you never know what people are going to say to you. So doing a competition where I walked into a room and did not know what topic I was about to have to talk about certainly prepared me for that. So it wasn't a direct connection, but it was very, very helpful.
I feel like it still has like a really good connection with it too, because especially with your avocado plants, you learn about sales pitches. No matter what your speech is, you got to sell it to the judges and be able to get your point across to them and what you're passionate about. Whatever topic you draw out of the hat, that's what you got to do.
I remember sophomore year, I think I lost to JP Prescott, and then he went and was he third or second in the nation? I don't remember. He done real well at nationals. I remember that. It was awesome. And I was like, I'm never going to be like JP. But no, then I drew a topic when I was competing against him at sub-districts about the grapefruit industry. And because of citrus greening and because of the psyllids and because of just, I don't want to say the citrus industry is dying, but there's some things that are out of the citrus farmers' control that is kind of taking a hit to the industry. I didn't know that much about grapefruits because the industry wasn't being taught about that much. I could not sit there and confidently write a speech about grapefruits. I couldn't. And so I got second. And then I was like, next year. But I wasn't prepared. And that taught me a big old lesson. Yeah. And I still don't know much about grapefruits.
So there's this quote that my dad always tells me before every FFA contest, before I have to speak or just anything related to anything that I have to do something. He tells me, you're either prepared or you're not. Mm-hmm. Now, it's something that's so simple and it's basically like common sense to most people, but it's something that now I think of it as almost like a good luck thing. Every time he tells me it, I either do good in the contest if I'm truly am prepared or I'm not. It just reminds me that you have to really know everything or know what you're talking about and feel passionate about it. If your whole heart isn't in something, then you're not going to succeed. So that's something that's always really stuck with me. And I think that that really goes in with the extent part of you're either prepared or you're not. And even still, you pulled it through in nationals. So that was good.
Fake it till you make it, but you can only fake it so far.
Yes, ma'am. That's true. So the next question is, basically, how did you seek help for your SAE and who helped you? I know you went a little bit about that, but who would you say was probably your biggest supporter within your SAE?
I'm gonna fall back to the Mr. Cribbs. He went and picked up a lot of my animals for me, selected great animals based on genetics, selected some great projects for me, and supported me with a ton of expertise about feeding, and working with my swine projects specifically, and just how to take care of that project, how to really pamper that project, and give that animal a quality of life that it would not have had if it was just another mass-produced animal. With my little heifer that I got to show, my Uncle Richard helped me so much with that. Not only did he loan that cow out to me to show, and I didn't have to pay a thing, he fed her in exchange for me showing her. And he, of course he's my uncle, so I still do get to go over there all the time, but he even lets me go out and see her and her babies and everything. And so I get to see how kind of taking care of that animal has made her calm down just a little bit, not fully. She's a wild card. You don't know what to expect with her still. And now she's a lot bigger, so it's even more scary. But that taught me a lot. She, the night we came home from the county fair my 8th grade year, she got second in her class to my cousin Clay's cow Mabel, who Mabel was obviously the better heifer. Love you, Lily Mae. Mabel was the better heifer though. And we let Lily Mae off the trailer, and my dad told me, whatever you do, don't let go. Well, she takes off running. And here I am, I'm talking, you ever seen people water ski? Mm-hmm. That's like me through the grass behind this cow, hanging on the lead rope. My dad's like, let go. And I'm like, Dad, you told me not to let go. But it was just so bad. I didn't let go though. And it might have like ripped my earlobe partially off my head and made it bleed a little bit, but it healed. Might have given me a couple of bruises, but they healed. And I learned a lot, and I got to show the cow for free, so it was worth it. And then with the avocados, my parents let me keep them in our backyard, and it was an eyesore. We had a couple of sawhorses set up out there that we put some of the smaller pots on, and the bigger ones sat on the ground. So when you sometimes drive by houses and they have the perpetual project in the front yard that never really gets cleaned up, and you're like, oh, well, that just looks bad. All the construction on I-4 in Orlando. Think about that. It is an eyesore. Thank you to my mama and my daddy for letting me keep those avocado trees out in the yard, even though they looked unsightly. Oh, goodness. They're all gone now. Thank goodness.
It's important to always have somebody advocating for you in everything you do. So it's kind of like our last question. So what is like one piece of advice that you'd like to give to the listeners or the people that are watching this?
There is no one like you. Simple. You have something to offer to the world that no one else can. And the world will never know if you do not get the courage to speak up. I know that myself and so many people that I knew in FFA and so many people that I know now tend to be discouraged in their places of work, in their schooling, in their extracurriculars, because they don't look like the other people there, or they don't sound like the other people there, or they don't act like the other people there, or they didn't come from a similar background. And what I say then is that there is a reason God did not make us all the same. And you are the only you there ever has been or ever will be. And you're going to relate to somebody that you may never even know about. Through state office, through running for national office, through everything I've done, I have had so many people approach me and tell me about their role models. Some of them I can relate to, some of them I can't. But it's so important to have such a wide variety of people coming from every background that people can look up to, because everybody needs somebody they can relate to. Everybody needs somebody that can encourage them, whether they realize they're encouraging them or not. Now, working in the sports field and doing all of that with my college, being a woman working in athletics sometimes is not easy, because that's a typically male-dominated area. And I've heard some discouraging things said about women who pursue that career path. Well, who's the little girl sitting there watching the World Series this week going to look up to if nobody on the screen is like her? Who is the young FFA member who can't afford a steer project going to look up to if everybody in positions of power had a huge project? Who's that young FFA member who doesn't come from an agricultural family going to look up to if everybody in positions of power come from agricultural families? I am so encouraged to see so many walks of life represented in FFA, and I think that only needs to increase, because everybody listening, you two, all those kids out there at their little birthday party, they are the only them in the world. You are the only you there ever will be, and somebody needs you, and there's not another one, so you have to do it because nobody else can. So that is my advice. Don't be afraid to be you, because you are the only you, and someone needs that specifically, and you will never know until you try.
That's really good, Emma. I really like that. Yeah. I feel like that's really important for our viewers to know, and just anybody in general, just piece of information, that piece of encouragement is just something that we really need to keep FFA going and make it true, make it real. And that's something that we all need to remember, is that we need to be real and just be ourselves.
Absolutely.
I think also something, this is I don't really know you very well. I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift. So she had this quote for she had this quote for Woman of the Year a few years ago, and it was basically saying that somewhere out there is a little girl that is sitting at her at her piano or in a choir classroom singing, and a few years later that girl was Billie Eilish. And what happens is true. You see what people are doing when they grow up, and we always need somebody to look up to, but also that we need to advocate for the people that, one, aren't like us, but that there are people that need to understand who they are to be that person for somebody else. So I think that's really great that you said that about FFA and agriculture and all that. So to conclude this episode, we just want to thank you so much, Emma, for being here with us today. It was really just a great learning experience as in general, of just being able to understand where you came from and everything about you in a way, and just being able to advocate for the next generation of state officers, FFA members, and all of that as a whole. So if you are a listener and if you have any questions or something that you'd like to learn more about this podcast, just DM us and we'll get in contact with you.
Now, with that being said, I believe we just concluded the second episode of the Blue and Gold Radio. And thank y'all all so much for tuning in, and a big special thank you to Emma for joining us today. We hope y'all have a great day.